Thank Nikos. Hope everyone is having a fantastic day today. So what we're going to be talking about is how we can get better security and how we can get better at compliance. And I've been a security assessor for a very long time now, and I kind of specialized in credit card, debit card security, mostly PCI-DSS, so PCI's payment card industry. But also I've been doing other security standards like CIS, the top 18, and ISF, standard of good practice. So really all the principles I've gained from this time I've learned from mostly the PCI space and all the security assessments. But what I found is that when doing the kind of security assessments, these principles also apply to any kind of business. And I find that most businesses I've actually gone through or have helped and help them look at the way they've structured their business and their information, they just don't get this one step right. And that means it can lead to some serious big holes. So I'm going to go through this quite quickly so I can give as much value as possible. So let's dive right in. So let's give us a bit of context right now. You know, in reality, most organizations focus on sales, marketing, and of course, delivery. They're here to make the profit, reduce the cost, and optimize the survival of the business. But where are you right now? So maybe you're a new business or new to security, you're a growing business, you're in your early years of survival, and you need to do security, but you don't know where to begin or who to believe. Well, you've had a go at security, not so sure how it applies to your business, not so sure if your policies or procedures are effective. Or maybe you do have some compliance overhead, and you know that you're not meeting those obligations right now, and those deadlines are coming up, or you have been breached, data theft or other. You don't know how it occurred, and that's starting to worry you right now because I'm not sure if you heard in the news, it can happen a second time. But imagine, where do you want to be? Maybe you want the right teams, the right processes. With these processes, you're able to identify vulnerabilities from the monitoring, and you're able to react quickly. And what would that mean? That means you're able to basically minimize damage, because in a lot of cases, when you're reacting, it's about damage limitation. So you're trying to minimize the cost and ultimately optimize the profit. And for some cases, you know, especially if you do get breached, sometimes it's about survival. Or in some other situations, as we mentioned before, maybe you are undergoing some kind of compliance audit and you want to stay compliant year 2, year 3, year 4. So why am I talking about all these situations on the left-hand side? Well, no matter where you are on your journey right now, I think in most cases, you are where you are based on your decisions and based on your processes to date. So if you're not getting to where you need to be right now in security, would you agree that you need to follow a different kind of path? Would you need to agree to follow a different kind of methodology? So you need to follow proven methods to protect your business. So, and that's why I'm here to talk to you about this one thing that can help you improve your security no matter where you are on your security journey right now. And it's a very straightforward step to help you to help prevent a breach, especially in this digital age when we're all connected. There's lots of business information and lots of customer information. Oops. So what's the number one asset in the world right now? It's not oil, it's not gold. And of course, we're on this talk because we are focused and we specialize in data. And the reality is right now, we've got legislations, especially in Europe or European customers. We've got things like GDPR. If you are taking payments, then of course there's PCI-DSS, you got HIPAA, you got SOX, etc. And there's more legislations that are coming out and the standards are changing all the time. And when I've gone into review a lot of customers right now, when I actually start asking and probing these questions, a lot of the companies actually are on the back foot. But maybe you've heard the phrase, prevention is better than a cure. And it's so true. And it reminds me of a story about one of my clients who failed badly on this one thing we're going to be discussing in this talk. It's January 2011. So it's in the winter time in the northwest of the UK. I'm sitting in so I'm standing in this toy store in the warehouse at the top floor under a tin roof. The rain is hitting this tin roof, and this large dome, white, these kind of like warehouse lamps to my left and to my right. there's metal shelving. On the left shelving, there's the Airfix toys like cars and airplanes. I remember the time when we used to glue them together and make these models. On the right-hand side, there's Hornby railway sets. But in front of me, there's Simon. He's got a suit on, he's got a bald head with a thick rimmed glasses. He looked more like a banker than some kind of managing director of a store. And Simon says to me, "Hey, Mike, thanks for coming back. I know you warned us this could happen, and I didn't really believe it." And I said to Simon, "Oh, what's the matter, Simon?" "Well, the bank is starting to charge us penalties and fines for non-compliance for our credit debit card security. We've had a go. We can't implement the tech controls to fix everything. It's costly. It's too much time. It's too much overhead. Too much tech jargon. I just need something simple. Please help." And this is a classic example of throwing money at technology solutions with all the bells and whistles because it's just not right for the business. They were actually over optimistic about their security, or when we looked at it, lack of security, when we really reviewed their systems and their environments. And that's what we did. I sat down with them, we looked at the environments, and as you could probably imagine, as a toy store, they had a front desk where customers come in, so they processed and captured card data on their retail point of sale systems that went and flow through to card data in the back-end databases. There was backups of the database, there's archives with card data. And not just that, they've got a call center whereby customers can call up on their VoIP, the network telephone systems. So we're capturing it that way on a network. And the agents are writing down the card data because as a toy store, you often don't deliver immediately. So you'd write down the card details in the books. It's shocking. And with the point of sale systems, I'm not sure if you know, but usually as a customer, you get your customer receipts, but also on the merchant side, the merchant gets a copy. And especially things are changing now, but still there's lots of places where the merchant receipt has your card details, the long 16 digits, 16 to 19 digits, depending where you are in the world, and your expiry date. You can do a lot of damage with that. So I gave them some recommendations to change the way the business operates. I get a call a week later. "No, sorry, Mike, we can't do your recommended changes. This is a family business. They've been doing the things the same way, the same process. We just don't like change." And I said to Sam, this is kind of what you need to do, because if you don't do this and if you don't persuade them, otherwise the consequences could be quite dire. As you know, based on the letters, your fines are only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And as I said, if nothing gets done, they will shut your card facilities. How would you feel if you were a toy store or a retail store collecting these details over the retail, internet, over telephone? How would you feel if they said, "We're not going to be taking card payments anymore"? For most businesses, you would have to shut shop. Anyway, they got things done. They did the things we recommended. They changed the business process, and they got compliant quicker and easier without less technology. And they're a lot safer as a consequence of that. But remember, we don't get secure from compliance. Compliance follows good security. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way to help these small, medium enterprises without going to too much technical jargon and focus more on the operation. So I put my programming hat on, used my 20 years in security plus over 10 years in audit risk to come up with something. And I came up with my framework. So this is the Protect protocol. And I don't have time to go through right now. But what I want to focus on is one section, which is about planning, the Business Secure Blueprint. And in the Business Secure Blueprint, this really allows you to kind of like assess your security posture in your business. And the very first thing that you need to do is understand your scope. So what do I need or mean by scope? It's really about what needs to be included as part of your security assessments. Because without this, without the correct scope, if you do have incorrect scope, assets may not be identified, assets may not be protected, information may be forgotten, and of course that consequently could lead to theft or loss. Because reality is that you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know what you don't know, how can you protect the info? But when you do get this right, you better understand what information, what assets you have in your business, which means that you can better introduce better controls to protect those assets, and hopefully in a more pragmatic and cost-effective manner. But Mike, scoping is hard, right? No, I disagree with that. the reality is, when I go into businesses, we walk through this process. It's just primarily because you need to follow a method to scope. Most businesses don't have this methodology, or a methodology at least, and don't have it documented. So that's really the truth. And the point is that if you don't have methodology, if the scope changes later on, especially when we're doing audits, you're kind of firefighting, and then you'll have to go back and change things upstream as well. There's an ex-American president called Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln, I'm not sure if you're aware, this is news to me before. Abraham was a skilled woodcutter before becoming president. He said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe." So would you agree that it's important to prepare and get the process right first time? Because again, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So just quickly as well, I'm going to start the scoping process on a very high level. So in scope, I know there's a gentleman called Bruce Schneier, and he coined the term people, process, and technology, but I'd like to include information. So TIP, T-I-P-P, technology, information, people, and process. And it's structured in this way that, we're here to protect information. Information is consumed and processed in a way to get some kind of desired output. And of course, supporting the process, we've got people and technology in order to conduct those, whether it's manual or automated. So the objective here is to understand what information we have, so we can choose what assets to protect as well. So that's our objective here, is to get a list of information and a list of technology later for when you take on the security assessment. So let's start with process. So again, we step away. I mean, a lot of people can focus on the actual data flows, deep dive into those data flows first. But if we just take a step back, this is one way to do it. Take that 30,000-foot high level view. What are divisions? What's our process in our business? And then what you can do from that is then drill down into these high level processes, into the sub processes, find out the people and what kind of activities are they doing? What kind of tasks are they performing? So one of the things you can take from this and maybe look at an organizational chart of your business to help you have that starting point. So once you look at the processes, sub-processes, tasks, etc., then you're trying to look at the types of information. And this is just a very high level overview of the types of information. So you may have some business information, so things like business plans you could use, also maybe some mission statements potentially. You may have some economic things, so maybe some financial data, financial forecasting, cash flow, profit and loss, things like this. And that's especially important if you are a public limited company. You may have things like admin, so things like maybe your HR, so you might have some employee files, and maybe you have some legal things with legal value. So maybe things like, I don't know if you do, but some businesses value their patents because you don't want to get that or intellectual property in the wrong hands. So ask yourself, what kind of assets do I want to protect? Focusing on the people and technology side, here's just a quick whistle-stop tour. Think about sites. So what do you mean by sites? So things that support your business, maybe the availability of information. So things like your server room and your air conditioning. What happens if that goes down? Will the server room overheat? Will the systems break? You may have your CCTV that supports your security. You may have a call center where information is processed. Applications. In most cases, people and businesses are very good at identifying the web apps that might be in scope, but they tend to forget the technology supporting it. So things like your web server apps behind the scenes, things like databases as well, and backups of those databases and client-side apps. Endpoints, that businesses are pretty good at this. So usually identifying their endpoints like laptops and desktops. Servers, they're very good at. They tend to fall behind things like the backups and the disk drives that might be lying around, especially disk drives, because a lot of people just try to physically destroy it without removing the actual electronic information. And think of things like your security systems, like access systems that might be in the scope for certain controls. People, businesses are very good at identifying the users in scope. Sometimes, there might be some security assessments whereby you need to speak to developers or decision makers as well, because there might be things in your software secure development lifecycle, SSDLC. You may want to speak to project teams because change control is interesting, and how you, especially how you implement change control in projects, because a lot of projects you introduce new technologies, you take our technologies, and that can really affect your scope. Third parties as well is very important for that if they were compromised, how would it compromise your company? And finally, of course, networks that support your business process for data. So these are kind of what are my tangible assets. So next, we get this information about the processes we talked about first, and from the process, we talk about information and the people and technology, and we put it down in some kind of asset list. So I'm not going to go through all this for the interest of time, but we've got this information about the processes, the information that's collected, with speaking to the people, what software are they using to process the information, and the underlying systems. So let's talk about systems you're going to be evaluating now. So this is something that, especially in PCI, you need to do, but you need to apply it in your business as well. And this gives you some kind of methodology. So first of all, there are systems that directly process, store, transmit that data. So what is that data? Is it credit cards, debit cards, names, emails, any kind of GDPR? So those kind of systems will form the data environment. You got category 2 devices, which are nothing to do with the processing of that data, but they happen to be in the same environment, or they're connected to the data environment. And we'll talk through this shortly with some examples. Or number 3, security impact and systems. This could be things like your firewall systems, your access control systems, things to do with antivirus, etc., etc. So how do we apply this? So I'll be applying this to some kind of network, but just for some kind of analogy, I'm trying to use a bank environment just for simplicity. And you won't find this any bank because that would be quite ridiculous. I have seen in the past when I've been reviewing some banks, but things are changing. So just imagine that you've got a bank, it's one huge building on here. And let's say, for example, our data, it may be credit cards, debit cards, or maybe even cash. So the customers come through this door right here, and it's stored in the safe. So there's a flow of the assets through here, which means this is our data environment. So what about these yellow things, these doors here, these category 2 items? Why are these important? Because hopefully these are all locked. No one can access it. No one can compromise it. But if they were compromised, if people were allowed through these doors, these could be used as a jumping point to start attacking our critical assets. So I'm not sure if you've seen things like movies whereby they try and compromise entrances, doors, windows, but not just that, they may even go through the ventilation shaft. Classic, right? The connected areas, but also they may decide to impact these gray ones, these category 3 items. So again, in the movies, they try and compromise the CCTV or access control system to let them in. So let's see how we can take this forward. So think about in terms of network, this flat environment. Maybe you've got a website with a web machine. So customers can access this information or enter this information. Because the information may not be stored, but even just processed or transmitted, this becomes our data environment. And because these machines are in the same environment, these are connected to inherently. And because maybe you may have some security systems, hopefully you don't have it in the same area, but if you do have some security systems in a flat environment, and I've seen this time and time again, these are always in scope because they're security impacting. So I hope that makes sense so far, because we're going to take it forward next. And this is it. Often the case when you're reviewing, say, for example, this bank analogy, they come in maybe cash or cards. They are handled maybe in this public area, and maybe there's staff who take it to the back room to store it in some safes. And this is very, very common. So the information or assets flow through here. So these red areas become our data environments. Inherently, you've got connected 2 devices because they're in the same environment. What about this area over here? There's no data being transmitted, but maybe it's, for example, a finance team, and the finance team has some entrances whereby they could enter, and it's connected to the data environment. So these are points of being in scope, because if you compromise this, you could get into the data environment. And of course, you got your areas of systems whereby they could impact security. So with that in mind, let me quickly move on. Is that what do? We need to basically get this information. We need to try and categorize it, as you mentioned, category 1, category 2, category 3, and I'll put in some extra information that you probably have for when you've identified the systems. examples of serial numbers, what did it do, what's the model, etc. But the most important thing is the categorization. First, you've got to document it, formalize it, and then identify the category 1, category 2, and category 3 items. So what next? You've identified the process of the information, the people and technologies, but in this case, we're focusing on systems. Now, well, what are we going to assess in our security assessment? Are we going to assess everything? In most cases, especially large environments, you just can't security assess everything. It's just not practical. In some smaller cases, small environments, you can assess pretty much the entire environment. But if you can't, this gives you some kind of rationale and methodology, and that's to do some kind of sampling. So if you take a representative sample, that will at least give you some kind of level of assurance that your security processes are right. And the more you can standardize, the better. For example, if you standardize the way you build machines, maybe you can reduce the amount of sample you want to security review. If you've got 2 or 3 or 4 different ways across the world to build systems, then maybe assessing one will not be representative of the other. So you need to kind of think about that. So let's say, for example, in our sampling approach, there's, in our example, 100 servers. You could take a high-level approach and say, I'm just going to sample 20. Okay, it's not great, but give you a starting point. Ideally, the more granular you get, the better it is for your security reviews. So let's say we take these 100 servers, maybe say there's 20 Linux type systems, maybe 80 Windows type systems. Then you can take that forward and say, maybe I'm going to sample 12 Linux and maybe 18 Windows, for example. But when we do audits, usually when we are asked as security assessors and auditors, we try to get a representative sample. And that means, especially under compliance, we go on for kind of role-based, because depending on the role of the system, there can be different kind of security configurations. Some might be in your DMZ or public zones, which may be more at risk. So for example, in this case, if we break down these 100 servers, maybe we've got 5 web, and we've got a few apps, domains, emails, and say, for example, the remainder or other servers. We then say, what's a representative sample of 5 web servers? Is it 2? Was it 3? Maybe 3, because it's over 50% as an example. And we take that on board. We take a number that we feel is representative, but it's all based on the methodology that we document for the business. So let's summarize what we've done. So we've gone through the high-level 30,000-foot view of the business to identify the processes, the sub-processes, the tasks. We've gone to try find out the types of information within the business information, customer information. We looked at maybe the data flows to identify the systems that are connected to, that are directly processing or transmitting, storing information, or maybe the category 3 systems, which are the security systems. So when you are in compliance, you need to do all this. For example, PCI, you need to think of all these kind of category 1, category 2, and category 3 items. But if you haven't got that kind of security burden, then at least focus on your category 1, which is your critical systems, and the category 3, which is your security systems that could infect your environment. And most importantly, you need to document your scoping methodology. I know that a lot of businesses go to is that they don't have a scoping methodology, and secondly, they don't document it. And if it's not documented, it's not kind of done. And you need to get it done so it's consistent. So it doesn't matter if I do it, you do it, anyone else does it. You kind of get to the right kind of point for scoping. So I know I've whizzed through that to try and give you as much information as possible and allow for Q&A. But here's my details if you want to connect with me. And again, thank you so much to the team at Digital Overdose. It's really, a fantastic conference. And thanks for the opportunity to share what I have with you. So that's the end of my presentation. Ready for Q&A.
That was fantastic. Great way to kick off the day. So we have had one question for the moment. We'll see if others crop up. But one of them was about the slides. Are you going to make them public?
I'm more than happy to. I'll work with you guys to find out what's the best way to do that.
Awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, and this was all concise and really straight to the point and easy to digest. So thank you for this awesome presentation. That was fantastic. And I know a lot of other people enjoyed it. That's why they're asking for the slides. I think it's a good source of learning material right there. And you don't see a whole lot on compliance nowadays. It's all hacking and security related. So this was a nice treat, I'd like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very important point to make. We do focus on the pen test and vulnerability test, but if you're talking about how is secure my business, we can talk about metrics afterwards, but you've got to do a security assessment. That's the starting point. Find out your gaps. If you need to do pen tests, that'll be highlighted in your gaps.
Yep. Thank you so much. Any other questions, Roland?
Well, I mean, I had one. Do you think that as time progresses and more obsolete compliance issues start mounting up, you have one standard that overrules another, et cetera, but they still exist, is this going to cause an issue in the long run?
I don't think it's going to cause an issue, but I would say is that if it's a standard that is supported, what you usually find is that there will be the standards will be updated as per the risks to the environment. For example, a HIPAA SOX and for example, PCI, especially PCI version 4 has just come out based on the risk to the environment and what is happening behind the scenes in the card space. You also have ISO 27001 that's being updated soon or recently, I need to check, because of the things that have been happening. So it's all based on historical performance and also what's happening in our modern culture and communities, what's happening out there. And we all, it's that cat and mouse game, between the attackers and the defenders. And we need to respond to that and update the standards based on what they see and what is happening. For example, in the card space as well, we changed a long time ago from usual payment systems to chip and pin. And what you saw is that a lot of fraud went away from, say, one stream, for example, in the retail, and it moved from retail down to online. So you saw a big increase in fraud online. So the standards have changed based on what we see. And you'll see that time and time again. And as I said before, there's new legislation, there's new standards being brought out every so often. And it's very hard to keep up with this. But what I would mention is stick to standards that apply to you. Now, if you don't have one, try look at CIS, for example, CIS Top 18, and also especially, for example, NIST. NIST is a great benchmark to get yourself started. And I'll say, how secure are we? Benchmark yourselves against those standards.
Awesome. I'm going to bump off a statement that James just said. How would you deal with people that categorically refuse to price a project without budget or time, that includes scoping and discovery?
So can you repeat that question again? Just so I'm clear.
Yeah, sorry. So James mentioned that he knows people that would refuse to price a project without budget and time for scoping and discovery. How would you deal with clients that are like that?
What I'd probably say is that I would advise that to again formalize the actual project management lifecycle, because if you don't include those critical elements, what could that mean? As we know in projects, it's usually over time and it's usually over budget. So that would indicate to me that they're not formalizing or they're not using standard practices, for example, Prince2 or other kind of methodologies in project management. And it's just a soft win. Today it is £250,000 or, you're going to go over budget, you're going over time. And if you don't include formalized security controls, checkpoints, you're going to find that you're going to be firefighting all the time. So you implement it, oh, we forgot about this. Or there's, you do a pen test and there's gaping holes in your security system, because when you introduce new projects, you introduce new risks. So you need to do BI, a business impact analysis. And for example, if you are doing things like regulations such as GDPR, it's very important you include these things, that business impact analysis for data protection. It's all about formalizing that methodology and project methodology, if that makes sense. And that's the emphasis. You always get people from time to time, but as James mentioned, but you've got to push back and you've got to show them the importance. And in most cases, the return on investment, if they include these controls and checks at the beginning.
Okay, and just to round it off, we have one final question. What advice do you have for a use case in which a customer might not like the scoping outcome as it's going to cause too many headaches to fix?
Absolutely, that happens time and time again. When you are doing scoping and when you are under some kind of compliance burden, you just have to refer to the standards and say, this is the situation, you need to go through it. And then you start doing a prioritization approach. What are your critical ones, critical systems that you need to focus on? For example, the category 1, systems that process, store, and transmit. The category 3, which is your security systems. And then focus on your category 2 device connected to. Or you can take some kind of a categorization approach. But this is all about prioritization to get to where you want to be, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to get security tomorrow. It's a maybe 6 to 18 month journey in most cases for most businesses.
Awesome. Well, I think that closes off our time for the talk. It was fantastic having you here.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you to the team.